being here today. As Julie said, this is so much fun, and this will be great today. So keep those little blue tickets handy, because at the end we're going to have a drawing. And today it's my pleasure to introduce Robert Gaglio. Chef Gaglio leads culinary tours in Italy. He teaches classes in Sarasota and in Longboat Key, as I understand, and probably other places that I've missed. I Googled him this morning. And he graciously accepted our invitation to be a presenter in our lecture series, and he was at our library a few years ago as well. From what I've read, he left the world of business and now shares his passion of cooking. Lucky us. Chef Gaglio.
Yeah, I was in banking for 24 years, wealth management, that kind of thing, suit and tie every day. And I think you can kind of guess which one do I like better. Yeah, it all started finding, to get the opportunity to meet my family in Sicily. So I was coming on 50, and it was an incredible experience. What can I say? I didn't know how to reach them. My father was, he was still alive at the time. Both my parents were. And he just wrote on the back of a coupon his aunt's name, and then her children, and then their children. So I pulled into the little town of Montelepre in Sicily and just went kind of door to door. And it's a long story, and there it was. They brought me into their home. I felt like I was like Jesus Christ. They're giving wine, it was incredible, gifts and things like that. And then I said to myself, I'm going to go back every year. This is 100 years. The only reason why we're not close is because my grandfather left, and back then when you left, you left. There was no email, there's nothing. It was like a stamp and a letter. And it probably took 2 months just to get a letter off back in 1912. So I did go back, and then the next thing you know, it's a long story, but I just started to take people and then turned into a business. And I was contemplating, I'm going through a midlife crisis now, so let's make the best of it, right? Never let a good crisis go to waste, right? So that's how I wound up here. And then I started teaching classes about the Italian culture with food in them. Some of them were cooking classes, but most of them are about knowledge, food, and entertainment. And Joy and I have been together for, I think, 4 years now, maybe 5. Remember, we had to add 2 years, so yeah, probably five years of working together. Sometimes we do dinner theater in people's homes. So we get 10 people around a table, and we do monologues, and she sings, and like 7 courses. You really feel like you're in Italy because you're eating for like 3.5 hours. So I always like to start with Joy because she makes me sharp, because if you have to follow Joy, you better be sharp. She's a lovely local opera singer, and I'm sure some of you have already heard her because she's done some performances on Longboat Key. But I'm just going to let you get in the mood, watch some pictures, and hear her lovely voice to get started.
Here I am. Now you can hear me. Hello. Yes, I'm actually going through my midlife crisis now. It's just working too darn much. Robert gives me goals. I am in business, and I want to retire and just do music and food and have a lot of fun. So I'm working on it. Any financial guys in the house that might help me with that? Financial advisors? Yeah, need that. Actually, I've been here on Anna Maria Anna Maria Island Orchestra for many, many, many years. So if you came to any of our concerts, you probably saw me there for at least 10 years. I hear we're planning a comeback since COVID. We're still down, but we have planning a COVID. Anybody been to Amico concerts? Only one? Oh my gosh, we've been gone too long. The pandemic's been a lot, and the island has changed so much. A lot of people are fairly new to the island, so maybe they didn't know us. But it was an orchestra and chorus, the only one in the area. Anna Maria has its own orchestra with chorus. It's the only one like it. But today, you get just me singing. And I have to say, I just wanted to start off with a happy song. Something that kind of echoes today. Beautiful sunny weather. Something about sunny Italy. Or something about O Sole Mio, my sunshine. And if you know the chorus, you're welcome to sing along. That was one of the song contest winners, and I know that many of you know. Who knows the song that was actually inspired by that? Think 1960s. Think the King. Yeah, Elvis. It's now or just get around a lot. And Big Cheese stole a lot of those for a lot of songs. So.
Beautiful, thank you, Joy. It's going to be a sweet day today because we're making tiramisu a little bit later, so I do need help with that. So if anyone out there think about who wants to jump in and make some tiramisu. Why Venice? Venice is so well known. Why do a program on it? Well, what can you guys tell me about Venice? What do you think of when I say Venice? Water. Gondolas. Romance. What's his name? What's his name? The philanderer guy.
Bocelli.
No, the romance guy, the one that put in prison. Why am I drawing? Well, I'm rusty. It's been 2 years since I've been in front of a crowd. What's his name? The guy that put him in the prison there. He's a famous. Casanova. Thank you. Forget about the raffle. Give it to this person. It has been 2 years since we've been doing this, so please, we are rusty, or at least I am. She's not. Casanova, right? That's what we think of. Or Marco Polo. That's the other one. We think of Marco Polo. But that's all we really think of. We don't really understand that Venice is a 1,000-year-old empire. I mean, did you know that? 1,000 years. We know about the Roman Empire, for sure, which is about the same, right? 900 years or so, Roman Empire. Why Venice? Because I think people, should really appreciate it, because I've heard too many people come home and say, oh, it was dirty, the water stunk, it's too crowded, it's this and that, and it's a shame, because there is so much more there. That's why I decided to do the program. And I'm going to get out of your way here, because I think I'm in the way of Friday night. Make sure this is on. I might have some mic trouble. Well, really, this was just a spot. I don't think this one's going to work.
It's got a short.
It was just a swamp where this area of Italy was back before Venice became a formation of people living there. There wasn't much there. Venice is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is obvious. The treasures there are just absolutely phenomenal. Italy, I think, is the #1 nation with the most UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and there's a reason. You can kind of see at its peak about 120,000 people live there. Now that's down to about 50,000. About 1,000 people move out of Venice each year, especially with Airbnb, because now they're able to rent out those apartments. And it's really dwindling. It kind of sounds like Anna Maria. Lots of canals, lots of beautiful bridges. It's a fascinating story. Goes back to prehistoric time. These people that ultimately migrated there, the Veneti, prehistoric, kind of as human history starts to formulate in the 8th century BC. They traded wax, honey. They traded with the Greeks all the way down from the lower, into the Mediterranean. So there was activity going on here. And they traced their descendants from Troy. And it's interesting, there's a place in Sicily that people came from Troy back at that time. So there was a catastrophic event that happened, and they migrated there. So that's a long time ago. Early conquerors are the Romans. Obviously, they conquered the whole peninsula and more. Justinian, the emperor, very famous all through Italy. You'll see things, Justinian stamp mark on it, Ravenna and other places throughout Italy and Sicily. After Rome falls, there's a list of invaders that come through. Erlich and Attila the Hun conquers this area, so they're basically just pillaging this once empire. So the people are kind of scattered, and they start to then move away from the towns and areas that they were in. You can see Treviso and Padua. They started to go to these islands. Now these were just little islands. They were really swamp and sandy. There wasn't much there. And here's a little kind of diagram if you can see Venice. Venice looks like a little fish actually, and Murano. How many people have been to Venice? Oh, so it's a good crowd. Have you spent more than a couple days? How many spent, say, 3 or more? Oh, good. So that's great. That's great to see. Because my favorite times are in the morning and then at night. So how did this formation come together? You're living in swamps. They had to come up with a way to build housing. And it was quite genius what they did. They pounded these pillars, like pilings. They took the lumber, the oak, and pounded it deep into the ground, the Coranto, that lower surface. And then they used stones which were not porous like brick. The stones were basically able to withstand being wet all the time, and that created the foundation. And then above the stone is the bricks, which is very porous. And as you know, Venice is in trouble because the water keeps rising, and that works like a wick brick. It's not designed to have water just sitting like that. Very ingenious. Can you see? I think there's a pointer here. I never knew this before I started to study about Venice. You know, like they actually pounded in. If you know St. Mark's Square, there's almost 2 million logs underneath the ground. I mean, 2 million. That's just St. Mark's Square. It's truly remarkable. So these pillars are holding up the foundation. You can imagine it's not very stable. When I look at Venice, I love that all the walls are not true, and they're wavy, and they're sagging, and you feel like you're in a toy playset. You know, it's like some toy thing, or like a stage in an opera or something. It doesn't seem real, you know? And I think that's why, because of all the settling that goes on. So these formations started as they started to accumulate population. Grotto was one of the first kind of established tribunes, kind of like a way to govern themselves, came together. And then in the 6th century, it started to form even a greater presence. Mostly to ferry people and goods that these folks kind of made money from doing, which later on, you know, water became Venice's key, you know, asset to become what it ultimately became, which was this amazing empire. Despite all this activity, though, in the 4th century, there really isn't much record of people living there. But it's, like if you look at maps and things from back then, it didn't show up, but there's definitely evidence through research that researchers have done. Italy is filled with stories. You know, everything's got a story. How did this become about? Well, it's a coincidence that it started, you know, on March 25th, which just happens to be the, you know, the equinox date. Probably the reality was it started somewhere in the second half of the 6th century as these communities start to formulate. Castello is a neighborhood. You can see here on the map. Right here, this is where they found evidence showing that this indeed is about the time that Venice starts to take its real birth. The formation of the island on the Rialto, once Venice, it starts to become more of kind of a government that takes form in Grotto, as I said earlier. Torcello, if you've taken a boat out there, it's completely abandoned. There's some hotels and some restaurants, but I can't imagine many people live there. Maybe just a few people do that work on the island. There's an amazing basilica there, though. If you don't go to Torcello, you're missing out. There's a Byzantine exhibit of the cathedral there. I really highly recommend. So this period is filled with a lot of strife, a lot of civil wars. The Doge is kind of representing the kind of Not quite the king, because it doesn't really have that kind of power. We'll get into more of the structure of the government and later on into the presentation. But this basically is the foundation which launches an empire that lasts 1,000 years. Very important. Water was so important because you're surrounded by salt water. And that's why they had these wellheads with elaborate carvings, and they meant a lot of so much importance. So these communities would kind of gather around the campo or the field, and there might be a bell tower or the well, and that's kind of the formation of the neighborhood. Okay, so then more invaders. It's the reason I think the history of Italy is so amazing is because there's so much of this back and forth attacking, coming from the north, coming from the south. When Charlemagne's son attacks, they're able to hold them off, and as I said, water was a big resource because it sort of like it was made a fortress around them. So they retreated into Venice, and that then became where the capital of Venice basically is formated on that island, moving from Grotto. This is the cathedral that I really highly recommend that you go see when you're there. It's quite a treasure. And this is like 10 o'clock in the morning, so there was nobody there, and that wasn't like off season too. So the key to Venice is getting up early and getting out there. You know, the reason why they excelled so well, because their religion was really money. They didn't care if you were Catholic or if you were Eastern Christian, if you were even Islamic. They wanted to trade your goods. They wanted to transfer you. They loved the Crusades because they could just get paid for shipping these knights who were crazy going down to Jerusalem. They made lots of money, and they had a knack. They were really the first kind of capitalists in Europe. They had a knack of negotiating with the Byzantine to give them kind of like NAFTA. It's kind of like they had all reign throughout the Byzantine Empire to do their trading, and they wouldn't be harmed by any foes or invaders, that they would be protected. And the same goes with the French. They negotiate and pay a tribune in order so they can be trading north and south. And that's how you made money back at this time, still today. I mean, look how critical it is that our shipping is. We got problems, and shipping, moving things around by water, and trading goods is how you became wealthy. A little stop for appetizers in Venice. Cicchetti is kind of a special time of day where you finish work and you just go have a snack. It could be anything from a boiled egg to this lovely octopus on a crostini. I like that time of day walking around because these wine bars, they'll have young kids too. If you can get to areas where it's not just all tourists, that you can kind of see them hanging out in front of these bars, and there's nowhere to sit because the buildings are so small. They're just sitting out on the boats and things that are just sitting in the canal. So it's a lot of fun to watch. Okay, we'll do another song, but I want to have a volunteer to get the first part of our tiramisu going. So do I have anyone right here? Okay. Let me just kind of whip this together, Joy, and you can maybe tell them a little bit about your next song. Actually, let me just kind of, if we can get this chord to go on. So, tiramisu is, how many people like tiramisu? The people who don't like it, what don't you like about it? It's too spongy. A lot of people say it's too sweet. They make it too sweet. There you go. Grab an apron. It can be too sweet. Like I look at the recipe, on this package here. And it says a quarter cup of sugar. And if you've looked at the cookie, it's coated with sugar. So this recipe, if you want to take the cream, maybe leave about 20%. Otherwise it's going to splash all over the place while we whip the cream. About 80% of it, you can just dump inside there. The reason why it's too sweet, because that's a lot of sugar. And I love this recipe because we're really just using the sugar on the cookie. We're going to add a little powdered sugar to the cheese and the, can you get it?
I will, it's stubborn.
We're going to add some powdered sugar. This is a really easy thing to make. Just a little bit. Let's see. That's good. Someone asked me, was it John asked me, where did I get my KitchenAid? Because it's a special color, I guess only at Kohl's had. And I said Craigslist. That's a great price. Okay, let her rip. Let's put the shield on. Because otherwise it's going to be like...
And what number you want?
Start out like almost a few to the end. We'll whip that. So we added some sugar to it. And you can go faster. Now, this isn't a traditional Venetian recipe because they don't really use cream. They just use the mascarpone cheese and they whip that up with egg. But there's a story behind it. I learned this recipe from my Sicilian cousin. And it's interesting because the French had their way with Italy, particularly in Sicily as well. And you see things like cream being used in Sicily. Where you go to Puglia, which is just not that far away, and they're like, they don't touch butter or cream. They don't really use it in their recipes. Somewhere along the line, my cousin in Sicily got this recipe, and it has cream in it. So let's whip that together pretty good. We'll do that next. We'll get this whipped together. They're right here. Yeah, this is just the shell. So these are, I think at Publix you can get them. There's a place called Gordon Foods in Bradenton. They have them there, decent price. All right, it's getting together pretty good, nice and firm. We don't want butter, right? Good. Well, look at that. We'll have a seat. We'll do the next part next, after this song or our next segment. And what's your name?
Karen.
Karen? Fantastic job. All right.
Since we are still in early Venice, and early Venice was part of the Roman Empire, of course, until it became exactly what Robert said, became its own state later on. But early Venice was always under the Roman Empire. And as part of the Roman Empire, we have Julius Caesar, who got it all together. And beautiful opera, Giulio Cesare. It's Cesare, it's not just Caesar, it's Cesare, his name's Cesare. And Giulio Cesare, he, of course, Julius Caesar. This opera actually was not by an Italian, but of course, in the day, because opera was pretty much invented in Italy, who I'll go into next, because we haven't gotten there yet. But that wasn't until one of the earliest operas were actually by Monteverdi, who is actually from Venice. And we'll talk about him in a minute. But let's go back to the story of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra. Trying to seduce Julius Caesar, sings this beautiful aria. She surrounds herself with all sorts of things to make her look good, gets in the middle, and sings this beautiful aria to try to seduce Julius Caesar. It's called Vadoro Pupille. Adoring eyes. She's praising him. Like through any dictator, give them lots of praise and you'll probably get what you want. It was no different. he wrote a lot of some of his operas in English, but his grand operas were, of course, in Italian, the language of opera.
Very nice. Okay, we mentioned about the drinking water, how important, and the symbols that were used, and the wellheads. Also, flooding. It could be its worst enemy. And as you know, now it's really critical that they figure this out. But floods have been through the history, probably many more that just aren't recorded. You can see in 1250, a 4-hour sea rise, wiped out homes and probably killed many people. In 1966, there was a flood that reached 6.5 feet high. Incredible, and just so sad, because you look at these treasures and you don't know how they do it, getting them cleaned up. 100 times a year, water will start just coming from the sewer, like just coming up, like percolating in a coffee percolator, just coming through. As the sea rises, it's going to be harder and harder. 2019, right before the pandemic, was probably one of the worst years, where it flooded 5 times in a single year. It was worse than the 1966 flood. If you guys recall, when you're walking around, you see like these platforms that they're all stacked up. So when they need to lay it, they lay all these platforms out so they can walk. They can have basically a raised sidewalk as the water slushes underneath it. Glass is a huge aspect of Venice. Everyone knows about the Venetian glass and Murano. This sand comes from Syria and parts of France. They don't have sand there to make glass with. Interesting enough, and we'll talk about this a little later, but they used to produce it in the island of Venice before it moved to Murano, and we'll talk about that story. St. Mark, this is an interesting story. Before that, St. Theodore was the patron saint. This is kind of under the Byzantine period, where they were not quite the power that they became. They were still sort of under the thumb of the Byzantine Empire. Well, they had their Saint Theodore was the patron saint at that time. But this was probably more like a political statement, where they went out and got their own patron saint. So they went to Constantinople and smuggled out the remains of St. Mark. And the way they did it, because you can imagine there were Muslims that were in that period of time. They buried the relic of St. Mark in the boat underneath smelly pork and things like that to smuggle it out so they wouldn't take the time to look at it. Another story, who knows? But something definitely did happen to make St. Mark the patron saint of Venice. A lot of people don't know that there was a patron saint before that. And then the mark of Saint Mark, this is the lion that you see all through Veneto. You see it all through. In the book, if the book is closed, it was a wartime. If it was an open book, they kind of came in just into the empire. I love these. I'm always taking pictures of the lion when I visit. Jewish people were in abundance because it was an open society. You could be, here again, they weren't hung up on, you had to be this religion, you had to be that. So it was a very multicultural situation. But they did have them segregated. And the word ghetto, is actually a word that comes from Venice. What it was, if you go into the Jewish ghetto of Venice, they used to make cannons there. It was a foundry, and the word ghetto back then was used for foundry, and that's how they got the word. So that first ghetto was in the Venice Island. Of course, they were forbidden to do different professions other than medicine and trading money, and they weren't really nice to them because who likes a banker, right? So Jews had to wear a special patch and hat, and they could not, they were forbidden to have sexual relationships with Christians. Another food fact, rice is a big thing. Rice was introduced from the Middle Ages into Spain and North Africa, then into Italy by the Arabs, the Islamic Empire. It turned out that through the years that rice was a very good product to grow in northern Italy. As you know, like Milan and Veneto, it's kind of the dish to eat. It ranks the #1 in consumption in all of Italy in rice. And it's never made with like a side, like we always have rice on the side. It's always the dish. So, okay, we got to do the next stage. So Karen, I think we just need you. We're going to need some help later, but Karen can kind of do this, and Joy will kind of cue up another song, but let's do the next.
You can try this mic if you need it. It just has a little short hold on to this.
Okay, so.
Just hold on to the bottom there, because the cord's loose.
Okay, so we're going to add some vanilla to our recipe. No, I just... One more. Perfect. Lots of things to watch, right?
All right.
Let's, we got to get that in there. It kind of has like a little in there. And then we bring this up and get yourself an egg. Add a little sugar, again, just a little.
Want the egg in there yet?
Yep. You can throw that egg in there, and it's kind of hard to get it started because the cheese is really firm at this point. The other thing what people say they don't like, it's too heavy. Tiramisu is like it's too much. You know, it's like too filling, or you know, after you've had a big meal. All right. Oh, you know what's in the cooler? Spatulas in the... Yeah, go ahead, you can grab it. Spatulas. So it's too heavy. So if you look at this recipe on this bag, there's like 5 eggs in it. And we're only going to use 3 eggs. So you'll see whoever the winner is, find out how lightful it is and light. Yeah? Give it a whip. I brewed the coffee this morning. You guys all have a espresso coffee maker. You guys have seen these, right? In the center is the cage where you put the coffee. The water goes on the bottom, fill it up to about where the valve is, and then get a good espresso. You could use decaf too. Sometimes if you're having dessert at night and you don't want decaf, you can get some decaf. How's it looking? Coming together?
You want another egg?
Sure. And this would be the point where you could add the alcohol, Marsala, or like rum or something like that. I never really add alcohol to dessert. I just don't. Do you need a napkin? You know what? I didn't really think ahead of that, did I?
That's right. I can use my...
There you go. So I just poured a little coffee in there to give it a color, to make it a little darker. So how are we doing? We got 2 eggs in there now?
Yep.
So when we pull it all together, we're going to need another volunteer. So this was about, it usually takes about, for this recipe, 3 of those ladyfinger packages. About 3 of these. These I think are 4 cups of espresso. So do about 3 of these. Just 1. Don't go to Publix for your cheese, because it's a fortune. The same product, same make, same company. This is like $5.50, $5.70 at Gordon Foods. Mark's Capone. It's sort of like our cream cheese, kind of. But go to Important Foods. Even like Aldi's has the skinny, the skinny one that's in Publix. I think it's $5 for like the skinny thing. It's probably half the size. Even Aldi has it cheaper. The skinny one is cheaper than Publix. I don't know why Publix charges so much for it. Good. It's about $20 to make this dessert. It's about, if you added it all up. So it's not a cheap dessert to make, but it's really good. How are we doing? One more, or that's it? Well, all 3 eggs are in? All right, awesome. So let's do another song, and then we'll learn a little bit more.
As promised, I was going to talk a little bit about Monteverdi. Because Monteverdi was next to Vivaldi, and everybody knows who Vivaldi is. But Vivaldi did mostly string and instrumental music. He did write a little vocal stuff, but it's very obscure. Almost everybody knows. Everybody knows that one. So knows the springtime, knows the seasons, and that's Vivaldi. But Monteverdi is actually the one who wrote a lot of vocal music, and it comes back to St. Mark's, because the Venetian School of Music was whoever was ahead of music at St. Mark's and all their students. So and Monteverdi was the head of music at St. Mark's. The Maestro di Cappella. Actually, I think he had another title that he went by, but he was there, and he wrote lots of church music. He was earlier, though. Handel, that I sang before, was a little bit after Monteverdi. He was really into the Baroque, and Monteverdi was right on the cusp. He was really 1500s to early 1600s. So in that case, he was really on the edge of Renaissance music and before Baroque. So we get some interesting stuff from him. And his topics, he wrote operas. Yes, he wrote operas, all Greek tragedies, every single one of them, I think. Orfeo, he had all of them. They were all Greek. And I have to say, finding material for soprano that's not totally depressing is very difficult. So I picked the shortest, totally depressing aria I could find. And guess what it's called? Lasciatemi morire. You know what that means? No, nothing to do with love. Lasciatemi, leave me to die. That's what it means. Lasciatemi, leave me to die. Yes, so it's a very short aria from Ariana, which of all these Greek tragedies, that was his material he had to go by. There you go. So lasciatemi morire. And it's tonally, you'll hear it. Polyphony-wise, it's a little bit on the odd side. Like I said, it was before Bach, who actually created a lot of the modern tonality that we listen to, chord structures and things. So Monteverdi was a little bit earlier, and you'll hear it.
Hold on.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting about Venice's history. It's the first to organize many, many things. The first postal system in 1400s. The first to have street lamps. The first to have a newspaper. You think of how powerful that is. That's like Silicon Valley in today's terms, to have a newspaper. It's this mercantile capitalism really starts getting away from feudal systems and really having an economy based on selling and no longer relying on serfs and lords and that sort of thing. One of the earliest banks is 1270. We know Siena was a big, powerful, the Medici were bankers also. So about this period of time, the banking system starts to establish, and Venice is in the front row. The first window pane in storefronts. First markets just sell coffee and coffee houses. I mean, what is Seattle having, next to Venice? It was the very first. Introduced the fork to Europe. Before you had a knife and a spoon, until a Byzantine princess comes, marries into and brings the fork to Venice, and that's how it gets through Europe. The first casino, first opera house. It wasn't the first to have opera sung, but this was the first dedicated theater just for opera. So opera was done, but it was done in other theaters. First copyright in 1486. The first copyright, that's where, you start seeing the value of people's work that isn't necessarily tangible. Easel painting and statistics. I mean, right now our lives are controlled by algorithms and things like that. Here's the casino and the opera house. It's still there today. This is what I find astonishing. Between 1495 and 1497, about a quarter of all printed books in Europe came from Venice. A quarter of all books printed. I mean, that to me is like Silicon Valley in the Western world. Think of the knowledge and the minds that flock to Venice because of that fact. Now, pasta isn't really been in the diet of the Venetians for long when you consider its history. It really wasn't until after the Second World War that they started to eat pasta in this area. People think Marco Polo brought pasta to Italy, and that's not true. This is basically probably a Persian recipe to make noodles. So the Middle East is where pasta comes from. When you think about it back then, what a great thing you could do, dry the pasta, it doesn't go bad. You could use it to. Now there was if you go to Pompeii, research that shows that there was sort of a pasta the Romans had, but it was just used for like a layering, like a lasagna. So kind of simultaneously they had it, but they certainly didn't make spaghetti and things like that. Pasta was more developed from the Persians. And seafood, I have a funny story. I don't speak Italian, but I know a little bit of Italian, and I know a little bit of the customs. And I'm sitting in, I think it was Verano, having lunch, and there's an older lady with a very young lady, probably mom and daughter, I didn't know at the time. So I'm looking at the daughter, and I'm eating, and I see her mom, or I didn't know, this older lady. She starts to put cheese on her vongole, which is clams and pasta. And I looked at her, and I was like, perché non capito parmesan vongole. I didn't understand why was she putting cheese on her fish. Because Italians do not put cheese on fish dishes, period. So if you have spaghetti, we like mussels, you would not find cheese on your fish. And she looked at me, bright-eyed, and goes, "Oh my God, my mom's the only Italian in all of Italy that puts cheese on her seafood." Obviously, she knew I wasn't Italian. She knew I was an American and spoke perfect English. Turns out she's like this wonderful violin player. She teaches in London. She was visiting her mom, and they took a trip to Venice. But yeah, so surprisingly, pasta really doesn't come into play in Venice until after the war. Swamp to empire. Commerce is, like I said earlier, religion is money, not anything. They didn't conquer places just for glory. They conquered places because they thought it could be a profitable venture to go into. It becomes the third largest state in all of Europe and the richest. 15th century, there's over 3,000 ships on the water. That's huge. I mean, it's unbelievable. They have a monopoly in salt. They trade in carpet silk, cinnamon, all kinds of things throughout this region. And it's the largest bullion market in the world. Becomes also luxury goods from the 14th and 16th century. It was all high-end products that were created there and sold throughout the European continent and beyond. No natural resources, so everything had to be brought in. They had silk manufacturing. Burano is the lace. Do you remember when those folks who've been there, the beautiful lace making? Murano is the glass and mirrors. And then in the 1500s, they start to go inland and start conquering bringing other places in and getting rid of feudalism and employing capitalism. So as they start to form their empire, they worked in textiles, English wool. They printed books, as we talked about earlier. Most Italians were illiterate, but this was an area of very literate people because of that book production. They invented reading glasses. Population peaks at 180,000. I said today it's maybe 50,000 people that are in the city of Venice. Venice becomes even richer through the 10th century. Venice becomes a trading partner. We talked about this earlier with the Byzantines, where they opened up the trade and basically negotiated to be the kind of like the best trading partner with the empire. And then Constantinople falls to Venice, and in 1203 they basically are controlling about 3/5 of the old Roman Empire. So I didn't know that. I mean, I thought of gondolas and the beautiful mast that they make there, but I had no idea that it was almost the size of the Roman Empire in size. And then, as I mentioned earlier, going into the mainland, and you could see all those beautiful villas all through that part of Veneto. The wealth was incredible. Polenta is another product. Of course, now it's made with corn, but it was probably made more with flour. And in the past, corn comes from South America, so that comes after Columbus. Fish is, as you can imagine, the number one, with salt and fish. Salt was really used to preserve food. There was no refrigeration. So, the saying, he's worth a pound of salt or whatever. He's the salt of the earth. Salt was very, very important. And preserving food with salt was, obviously fish was a way to eat something and have it later. Bridges, I just love Venice. This is my favorite bridge in all of Venice. I love that there's no handles. That was typically how it was. They didn't have handles. All the bridges were this way, and there's only a few left that look like this. And they have great names, Bridge of the Honest Woman. I don't know if they have a Bridge of the Dishonest Woman. And then look at this little girl. She just is like a little ballerina. And Bridge of Sighs, of course, we know that. That's where Casanova was. And this prison right here, underneath the palace. Gondolas. My recommendation is don't go to gondola by St. Mark's Square because it'd be like a parking lot. Go into a neighborhood. If you need Luca's email, I'll be happy to give it to you. He's fantastic. He takes you into the Jewish quarter, and it's like you're just out there by yourself. So here, interesting too, the gondoliers really didn't start wearing a uniform until the 1920s. And before, they used to be very multicolored and extravagant, and I guess that was changed it was forbidden under the government. St. Mark's Square and the cathedral, there you could see, this is St. Theodore, and then you can't really see the line for St. Mark. There were actually 3 of these pillars that were brought from Constantinople, but one of them fell in the swamp somewhere in the water. They don't know where it is. It'd be cool if they found the 3rd one. Many transformations. The thing was destroyed in 976 and rebuilt. It's one of the most fascinating churches you can go to. Here's a painting of what it kind of looked like back in the 1700s. Really incredible. Always working on it. You can see here, this was last year, they're working on this section. It's heartbreaking. This was interesting. The bell tower collapsed in 1902, the original one, and nobody died. I mean, look at that pile of bricks, and it happened in the middle of the night, I guess. Carnival, that's what we think about. Carnival is another thing that is associated with Venice. Today, it's basically a corporate deal. You know, it's like the Super Bowl. Everything's got a name, and the fish market's still there. Smaller, you know, but it's still there. You can go, if you rent an apartment, you can go there and get some great seafood. Government, corrupt and widespread. Sounds like ours. 9/10 of the population were simple, probably didn't read much, weren't literate, and highly structured hierarchy of society. 10% of the population effectively mastered the other population. You had to trace your lineage in the Golden Book, so you had, in order to reach that level, your families had to have been there for a long time. Let's see here. Military commanders, I like this. They were old people. And the Doge wasn't really like the king. He was just kind of like the Queen of England. You know, not really, didn't have power. They always picked some old guy because, you know, if he died, it was better for him to die sooner than later because you didn't want that guy to get that much power. So, not a really fun job, I don't think. You know, and you had to wear a funny hat too. Castellani and the Nicolotti. These were the 2 types of kind of like the Bronx and Queens, I guess. You know, this was the 2 neighborhoods. Castellanis were poor gondoliers, servants, and Nicolotti, they were fishermen, and they also had their own leader, their own doge. Battle of the Bridge of Fists, where they actually, for fun, would get on each side of the bridge and start pummeling each other, throwing each other in the water. And I guess it got so bad that in 1705, they, you know, after some stabbings and stone throwing, they said, "You got to stop this. We can't do this anymore." Kind of like hockey is, you know, they kind of came in and said, "Enough of this, guys." So funny. Carnival, that's now, isn't Carnival looking at this week? Fat Tuesday? Yeah. So beautiful. Here's the, talking about the trade. You could see, you know, this was the Flanders route where they traded their well-made products and distributed them throughout the Mediterranean. Now, it's obviously they start losing power because England starts to become the exact opposite. They start to be making better products, cheaper products, and start taking over this, you know, the European continent. The 2 populations, we talked about the Popolani. These were kind of like, they were in the unions and things, carpenters, rope makers. Cittadinis, this was where they had 3 generations. You had to show that you were not a laborer to be in this level. So lawyers, notaries, and then the nobles were the ones that controlled 10% of these families, kind of controlled it. And this is what I was talking about, the Golden Book. you had to trace your family back to this book of 1297 in order to be considered a noble. So here's a really mind-blowing fact. The Arsenale, we all know, I'm from Detroit, and I had learned that Henry Ford invented the assembly line. That's not true. They could build 30 boats. They could put 30 boats in 10 days, fully outfitted out of this factory. This is way before Henry Ford. Employed 6,000 to 16,000 workers, and they drank a lot of wine. They probably drink like 5-6 liters a day, those people. So and it's amazing they could get all that work done being that drunk, but they had a high tolerance level, I guess. But isn't that, I mean, who knew this? Did you guys know
Yeah,
this?
right.
Did you ever walk through, did you ever go down that area? That's kind of where the, what's the, every 2 years, the biannual thing that they do. It's like the expo. So that, it's still there, and they hold, events there and everything, but it was just, you could just see it was the engine of the power to produce that kind of strength, military strength and seamanship. I like the fact that the generals could not control more than 20 men, because no coup d'etats. They didn't want here again and they didn't want Venetian men. They wanted kind of mercenaries to kind of control things. Not a bad thing to do. Here we are on Food Fact, and we're going to tackle, we need a partner for Karen, so who wants to help Karen? Who wants to help Karen? Oh, come on. We need another person. Come on. What's your name? Gloria? Karen, come on up here.
Okay.
So let's make some money for you.
What do we do?
We're going to put some gloves on. So this is probably the most difficult part. Not difficult, but you either get this wrong or you get it right. If it's wrong, you're going to need a cup or your tiramisu. But I know your hand gets a little sweaty. So we're going to start with so where's our spatula? No? So we're just going to put a little on the bottom of our cheese mixture. Just a little, just to keep them in place. Come on over here. And Gloria, you too. So I poured all that coffee into here. Alright, so I like the sugar side on the top. Why? Because I guess I'm OCD. I don't know if it matters. Just like a submarine going in and out. Okay. If you do too much, it's going to crumble, or if it's not crumble, it's going to get really mushy. There we go.
Mushy. How fast can you do it?
So just go down like that. Let the coffee come off it. And then there's who's seen the Stanley Tucci shows? The one with Rome, that Don Pazza, he's a DJ, he cooks. We have an opera singer while we cook. Joy's going to sing while we do it.
Oh, well, so, like I said, a lot of the musicians that are famous for being the Venetian School of Music came from St. Mark's because, of course, the church was the one thing there. Now, in 1637 is when they built the first theater. It was one of the oldest opera houses. That's where they performed most all of the operas. It was the Teatro San Castellano. Teatro San Castellano in 1637. So, and Monteverdi actually had a trittico, three operas that a series of three operas that he dedicated to that. But there was a lot of, all the other operas would go to the theater. It wasn't really an opera house. So we still have St. Mark's and all the different maestros de capella, the masters of music at the St. Mark's went along. And my next piece is actually from a later master of music there at St. Mark's, Antonio Caldara. He actually started out as a choir boy at St. Mark's and worked his way up the ranks. Funny enough, though, most of his operas that he wrote, which I'm sure nobody's ever heard of any of them, it's strange that Baroque opera in Italy was very popular at the time by Italian composers, but very little of it made it into modern repertoire. Not done anymore, but some of the arias, the little pieces of music from it, did survive. Thank you to a gentleman who in the late 1800s when he collected a lot of it and put it into a publication that Schirmer published and continues to publish to this day. So this opera, this aria, it's a canzonetta. It came from one of Caldara's operas. He wrote several, and none of them were actually produced, were actually opened in Venice, even though he was there as the maestro di capella. There wasn't an opera house there in the early 1700s, so they all opened in Vienna, which was the nearest big city north with the biggest opera house. He didn't go down anywhere else. That was the nearest opera house in Vienna, so that's where he opened his operas. This is a beautiful song.
Joy, just before you start, I just want to let them know that we put the layer of just the cheese on that first layer. So we dipped it, made it for so like lasagna. So they're going to do another layer of the cookies.
Give me a second to cue up my music here.
Tiramisu was probably 1960s. It's not an old dessert. Yeah, so I think it's old.
Pump up the volume here. So, Seppen Crudele. Basically, the lyrics of this little song is, "Why do you treat me so bad? I don't deserve it." It's pretty much it. Seppen Crudele, mi fai languire. I languish because you treat me so bad, and I don't deserve it. But it's a beautiful song. It's actually one of the most popular old arie antiche, old songs. Seppen Crudele.
Sempre
So we mixed what was left, about a third of the cheese I left in there. And then I folded in the whipped cream to put on the next layer. So the first layer I used the straight cream, or the straight cheese, and then the second layer is a combination. Now they're going to put another layer of cookies. How are we doing on coffee? So this is like, it's going to come out like this huge thing, and you're going to like, wow, that's too much, but it's like a cloud. Trust me. All right? So, oh, good idea.
No, we don't know.
So go this way. What she was saying is, when we put the lady finger down, instead of all going the same way, interchange it, you know, kind of like we, like that. So just go this way. All right. Has anybody made
tiramisu before? You like making it? Yeah. Is it a similar recipe, or do you use alcohol?
No, you're doing a little different than I did. I didn't really know what I was doing at first, so, but I like the dipping. And I think I poured mine over the.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. I think you can control it better
Yeah.
by dipping it. Because if it gets too mushy, it gets all watery and.
It was still good.
Yeah, yeah. You can, and it should sit. That's why we're not eating it right now, because it really needs to sit for at least 8 hours, I would think. How are we doing on time? We're almost done, so. Yeah. So tips here. You guys have been there, so you don't really need to know. You know. The fact that you guys stayed more than one day, that's huge, because you really need to. Obviously, great shoes. Don't miss Torcello if you go back, if you haven't seen it. Try to find the hotels that are local. No Italian owns any of those restaurants anymore on the Grand Canal. They're all from Morocco and other places. They're not Italians. I love the GPS because you can just download it. You're going to get lost in Venice. It's just the way it is. Do you guys use a porter when you got there for your luggage? I got this guy. He's like, he just talks about how bad the government is and don't get your health care here. He goes to Germany. It's part of the trip. I love listening. His name's Davide. It's a riot. So we are coming to our conclusion. I made some biscotti for you on your way out. So don't just leave just yet, because I want to show you how we do the last piece here. So, now take your job. Okay, take the whipped cream and put it on the top. This has a lid, but you're not going to be, whoever wins, you're not going to be able to use the lid. Just kind of. How many calories? Yeah, it's got a few calories. So now, once we get the top done, then we're going to do the chocolate. And I always do the chocolate over the sink kind of area, because it's a big mess. So let's pitch that into the... I'm messy. You could throw that in here. Oh, I'm leaving all the good stuff there. I'm leaving... She must be Sicilian. Us Sicilians don't usually throw anything away. Hence the coupon my dad wrote his aunt's name on. Okay. So over this cutting board, this is good. Let's get rid of this. That's good. All right, so over this area here, I want you to just kind of hold that and sprinkle, just stay on this area so we keep it on the cutting board. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Just kind of hit it. And then we'll take this. And these are at Aldi's for like $2 at Publix. Same kind of chocolate. I think these are, there might be even a little more here. It's $2, it's like $2.50 at Publix. So we're going to take one of these, and I'm just going to use a zester to put it on the top. And it's 70%. Is it working? There you go. So put it in the fridge overnight is the best, because then all the cream and stuff goes inside the cake. Another person said, I made it once and it was crunchy. It shouldn't be crunchy. If you want to hang around, I know Joy will do one last song, but I wanted to ask, does anyone have any questions? No?
Does everybody have their little ticket, because we're going to draw after.
You have a question back here? Yeah, you can find pasteurized eggs, not pasture-raised chickens, but pasteurized eggs. There's like a little stamp on them. You can find that. You know, Rocky did it in the movie when I was a kid, so if Rocky can do it, so can I.
My husband does it all the time.
You know, I do want to share with you before you go, and we'll put this up here.
Make sure they're fresh. Really fresh.
I want to share, class lesson. Here is the classes that we're doing with ACE. It's Adult Community Enrichment. It's based on Stanley Tucci's show, Surgery for Italy. And you can see Tucci right there with the glasses like this.
Looks a lot like Robert.
And I said, I've been wearing my hair like this since he had hair. So he copied me. So, okay, Joy, let's bring them home, and don't forget some biscotti, and we'll pull, after the song, we'll pull our drawing. I hope you guys enjoyed your afternoon. Yes? Yeah, they're not online, they're in person. And we actually serve lunch through the program. ACE is Beneva and Proctor. So pretend you're Columbus right now, and you're going on a long voyage. So it's very far away. You know, Proctor and Beneva, yeah. There's a college there, the Suncoast Technical College. But I know, plan to make it a day. Go to Selby Gardens and do something else. Ready?
Yeah, it's a bit of a drive, but come on down, yes.
We're making pasta, bologna.
Ah, yes, it's Bolognese this week, on Tuesday. We've still got a few more. We've got, what else left? Four more we have. Milano,
Toscana, and Sicilia.
the homeland of Sicilia. So, and they'll all be fun. Every time it's a different adventure. And if you make the trip, join us Tuesday. It's like 12:30. And online at ACE.
And when you get your biscotti, there's a little pad, so you can give me your email. I'll put you on my email list to tell you about other things that we're doing.
Yeah, we can send you the link for the class, because they have an online enrollment. You can just send out the link, and if you want to come to class, you click. It's the best deal in town. Really, you get lunch and entertainment and a fabulous lecture, lots of knowledge, and I hope that everybody will come and see us and travel with us.
Travel along.
Travel a long way. Hey, whether you're going to travel a long way with us, down to Sarasota, or even further to Italy. They're really fabulous. So this is where we come into time to say goodbye. But time to say goodbye is not time to say goodbye. It's con te partirò. With you I will go, is what it really means. So, and well, cuando sono solo, when I'm alone, I look at the horizon and I can't find the words. How in the light I lose my soul, and how I will travel with you. With you, with you, with you. We'll go and see other countries, other seas we've never seen. I will always go with you. So con te partirò.
Is Andrea there?
Andrea, you know, he might be there. He may be in Italy. I don't know where he's hanging out these days. That was the last concert I did before we broke for the pandemic. He did did anybody go to that concert? It was the Valentine's concert in 2020 in Tampa. Yeah, yeah. I was in the back, of course. It was great. Because I do sing with Opera Tampa on occasion. On occasion, when I can get up there. And when I get downstairs instead of getting up to Tampa. We have to get around ways to be able to perform in this community. If I do it in Italian, will you all know? 946056. We've got a winner! You know, now that I totally forgot to mention, not too far away is Longboat Key.
Oh.
Oh my goodness.
Longboat Key, what do you mean?
Oh, I'm actually doing a performance myself there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in a couple weeks, actually on the 18th, part of the concert
Sign up
series.
for our email,
Yeah.
send all the information.
So,
Awesome, thank you.